A dog wouldn't look at anyone after his owner died, and even his new caretakers couldn't ease his deep sadness. Months later, he suddenly heard a familiar voice. When he went to see, he couldn't believe his eyes. The quiet of the Callahan home was broken by Rio's sad sigh. The once lively golden retriever mix now lay curled up in a corner of the spare room, staring at the bare wall. Days turned into weeks, and the 10-year-old dog still wouldn't interact with his new caretakers, Ryan and Tasia. The Callahans had taken Rio in after rescuing him from the local animal shelter, where he had been left heartbroken after losing his beloved owner, Edward. Despite their best efforts to cheer him up, Rio remained distant, showing deep sadness that pulled at the couple's hearts. Rio spent his days all alone, with only the sound of his water bowl rattling or the soft steps of the Callahans' other dogs nearby. He would jump at their presence, his ears back, clearly signaling that he didn't want to be around them. He even refused to look at them. Tasia often sat with Rio, talking softly and giving him gentle pats, but he wouldn't respond. His eyes were unfocused, and he seemed completely lost. Ryan also tried to connect with the sad dog, but Rio kept his distance, as if he had lost all trust in the world. Then one quiet afternoon, as Rio sat alone in his designated corner, a familiar voice drifted in from the living room. His ears perked up instantly, and his head tilted to the side as he tried to listen. Could it be? He was undoubtedly imagining things, lost in the depths of his grief. That voice had once been his favorite sound in the whole world, but he hadn't heard it in a long while and had believed he would never hear it again. Rio's sadness stemmed from the loss of his beloved owner, Edward. For the past decade, they had shared a joyful life together. Edward adopted Rio as a puppy, and from that day on, they were inseparable. They spent countless hours playing fetch, taking leisurely walks to the park, and cuddling on the sofa to watch old movies. Edward showered Rio with love and understood all of his quirks, while Rio was utterly devoted to him. Then, without warning, tragedy struck. Edward suffered a medical emergency and was rushed to the hospital, where he was declared dead. Rio was taken to a local animal shelter, leaving the comforts of home for a sterile and frightening environment. His world was turned upside down, and the absence of Edward left him feeling lost and alone. Despite the shelter staff's best efforts to console him, Rio refused to engage, his body language showing he had given up on life. The joy that once filled him was replaced by deep grief. Christina, a dedicated shelter employee, felt a heavy heart as she watched Rio's heartbreaking situation. Recognizing that he had known love, she reached out to Detroit Dog Rescue, known for helping troubled animals. Rand Callahan, a volunteer, listened to Christina's account of Rio's plight and felt compelled to help. "We'll take him," he said. "Tasha and I will foster him and do everything we can to bring him back from the brink." The next day, Ryan and his wife Tasha arrived at the shelter, their eyes immediately drawn to the corner where Rio sat, his gaze unfocused and his body language radiating despair. Tasha felt a lump in her throat as she approached the enclosure, her movements slow and gentle. "Oh, Rio," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What happened to you, sweetheart?" At the sound of Tasha's voice, Rio's ears perked up ever so slightly, but he still refused to turn his head or make eye contact. Ryan watched anxiously, hoping their presence would trigger some glimmer of recognition in the dog. Slowly, he reached out a hand, allowing Rio to catch his scent before gently stroking the dog's soft fur. Rio flinched but didn't pull away, and Ryan took that as a positive sign. "I think he's willing to give us a chance," he said, turning to Christina. "We'd like to take him home with us, if that's all right." Christina sighed with relief. "I'm so glad to hear that. Rio's been through so much, and I worried he might not make it. You two are his last hope." Ryan and Tasha carefully coaxed Rio out of his enclosure and into their car. The dog trembled, unsure but allowed them to guide him. As they drove away from the shelter, Rio pressed his nose against the window, taking in the new sights with a mix of fear and curiosity. When they arrived at the Callahans' cozy home, Ryan and Tasha slowly introduced Rio to their other dog. At first wary, Rio gradually relaxed, letting the other pups sniff him. Tasha set up a comfortable space for Rio in Ryan's home office, with a soft bed, a water bowl, and some toys, hoping he would feel safe and eventually see their home as his own. For the first few days, Rio stayed in his corner, preferring to curl up and stare at the wall. Ryan and Tasha sat with him, speaking softly and giving gentle pats, but he remained withdrawn, his eyes filled with deep sadness. Then one afternoon, something changed. Rio heard a familiar voice and sprang to his feet, finally focusing on something other than the wall. He cautiously approached the doorway, his tail starting to wag slightly. As the voice fell silent, Rio let out a soft whimper, locking eyes with the person who had spoken. Standing in the living room was Edward, his beloved owner, whom he thought was dead. Rio froze, his breath catching in his throat as he drank in the sight of the man he had mourned. Edward's eyes widened in recognition, and a look of pure joy and disbelief spread across his features. "Rio," he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. "My God, is that you?" The dog let out a series of excited barks, his tail wagging furiously as he bounded towards his master, his paws scrambling to reach the man he had thought lost forever. Edward dropped to his knees, his arms outstretched, and as Rio collided with him, A torrent of tears streamed down his face. "Oh my boy," Edward cried, burying his face in Rio's soft fur. "I can't believe it's you. I thought I'd never see you again." Rio whined and nuzzled against him, his entire body trembling with a mix of relief, joy, and sheer disbelief. Watching the reunion from the doorway, the Callahans shed tears at the heartwarming scene. "What happened, Edward?" Tasha asked gently. "We were told you had passed away." Edward looked up, his expression pained. "It's a long story," he said. "I was in a coma after my medical emergency, and the hospital staff mistakenly thought I didn't make it. By the time I woke up and realized Rio was gone, he had already been taken to the shelter." He shook his head and tightened his grip on Rio. "I've been searching for him for weeks ever since I was discharged. I thought I'd never see him again." The Callahans nodded, their hearts swelling with empathy. "Well, he's here now," Ryan said, a warm smile spreading across his face. "He's been waiting for you." Edward turned his gaze back to Rio, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, my boy," he whispered, gently stroking the dog's fur. "I never meant to leave you, but I'm here now, and I'm never letting you go again." Rio responded with a series of contented whimpers, his tail wagging furiously as he basked in the love and attention of his long-lost owner. The Callahans watched the reunion with a sense of joy and fulfillment, knowing that they had played a pivotal role in reuniting this beloved pair. As Edward and Rio embraced, the weight of their separation finally lifted, and the air filled with the sound of their shared laughter and the pitter-patter of Rio's excited paws. The Callahans knew at that moment they had witnessed something truly extraordinary, the unbreakable bond between a man and his loyal companion, a bond that had endured even through the darkest of times. The drive back to Edward's home was filled with a sense of renewed hope and joy. Rio was overjoyed to be reunited with his beloved owner and couldn't stop wagging his tail and nuzzling against his side. Edward in turn was overwhelmed with gratitude and relief, his eyes shining with tears of happiness. As they pulled into the driveway, Rio perked up, excited by the familiar sights and smells of his old home. He jumped out of the car, eager to explore, barking happily and wagging his tail. Edward, reassuring him with a hand on his back, followed closely. Once inside, Rio's energy surged as he raced around, sniffing every corner of the house. Edward smiled, patting him lovingly and saying, "Welcome home, Rio. I'm never letting you go again." Weeks later, while out for a walk, Rio suddenly stopped, his ears perked up. Edward followed his gaze and felt grateful when he saw the Callahans walking their dogs nearby. "Ryan, Tasha," he called, smiling widely. The couple rushed over, excited to see them. Rio bounded to them, wagging his tail and nuzzling their hands. Edward hugged Tasha, expressing his heartfelt gratitude for their help in reuniting him with Rio. Ryan smiled and said, "Seeing you both together is all we need." Tasha added, "Rio is special, we're just glad to have helped." Edward, with tears in his eyes, shared how terrified he was while searching for Rio. The Callahans felt joy at witnessing their bond, which had survived tough times. "Thank you. I'll be forever in your debt," Edward said gratefully. As they walked home, Rio stayed close to Edward, his tail wagging gently. He seemed more confident and happy, as if he had been reborn. Edward marveled at the change, knowing they had faced their challenges and emerged stronger. With Rio by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next, grateful for their enduring love and the Callahans' kindness. What do you think of this story? Let us know in the comments section. I hope you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your loved ones. Also subscribe and press the bell icon to never miss the update from our channel. Thank you.